A question for you. Do you have a value proposition or just a bunch of techno-Latin? What is your value proposition? Write it out. What question does a killer value proposition answer? A KVP answers the most important question that anyone can ask you about your product, your service, or your business. It's the question that your customers ask themselves every day about any purchase they make, and it's this: why should I do business with you instead of choosing any other product or solution and taking any other option or course available to me, including the option of doing nothing at all? Good question. And it's the question that if you can't answer to your prospective customer satisfaction, that will drive them to seek an answer from one of your competitors. What is amazing to me is how many companies have been in business for 5, 10, even longer, many years, and have never written down an answer to this question. Some of them succeed despite themselves, not because they're doing things right. Over and over and over again, I see businesses that have a massive stratification in their sales, in the results of their sales force. Usually it's 80-20. You have 20% of the sales force that does twice as well as the rest of the sales force. And then you have 1 or 2 people that double the rest of those people's results. Why? Well, Huthwaite did a study over 10 years with 30,000 salespeople, and they found that the number one thing that rock stars did differently than any other rep was not prospecting, was not cold calling, was not making better pitches, was not closing. It was that consistently throughout the entire selling process, rock stars communicated the value of the product or service to the customer in their language in a way that said, this is how it's going to affect your company, this is how it's going to impact you, and this is what it's going to do. That doesn't seem that difficult, but keeping things simple is one of the hardest things in the world to do. In looking at some of the biggest corporations in America, as I look at their marketing, their advertising, and I talk to their sales forces, it's amazing that they don't have an answer to this question. They basically do what we call show up and throw up. They visit a prospect or they get someone on the phone and they just say, oh, let me tell you about the features, let me tell you about the features. And they drive people away. A funny story. I have a friend who works with a client of mine. And he and my client were actually in a meeting. They were considering buying some technology to replace a segment of their product. They wanted to be really efficient, and they're really good business guys. So what they did is they created a 2-page document describing where they were going and what they needed. A sales rep from this particular technology company came in, and the CEO of my client says, listen, we'd like to tell you some things about this particular situation we're in. And he says, no, hold on, let me just tell you a little bit about our product. So they listened for a few minutes, and then the CEO butts in again, and he says, listen, I think we really need to talk more about what our needs are before we talk about the product. And the guy says, well, hold on a second, let me just finish going through this spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet had something like 40 features in it. Finally, my friend who was working as a consultant here stopped the guy cold and said, listen, you are wasting our time. I want to tell you what our needs are. We don't need to see every feature you got. And the sales rep responded with frustration. He said, look, I'm just trying to tell you about all the features of my product so I can sell this to you. That meeting ended very quickly from that point. Unfortunately, that happens way too often. And if you're a marketer, or if you're the person responsible for equipping your sales force with the message and the killer value proposition they need to sell, this might be your fault. You need to help them identify what the killer value proposition is, put it in the customer's language, and equip them with the tools they need to sell, and not be busy giving them marketing slicks or feature lists. Whoever said that those things sold products? They don't. The best sales reps, the rock stars we work with, the guys that do 200-300% of quota. One of the guys we work with went from doing 80-90% of quota to 450%. Don't talk about features. They don't use techno-Latin. They don't show up and throw up. They figure out what the killer value proposition is. They figure out what's important to a customer, if marketing hasn't told them, and they use that. Now, Where we did find killer value propositions, too many of them seem not to be in the language compelling to customers. Instead, when we did our research recently on 50 or 60 companies, these things seemed like they were dreamed up by an internal marketing or product team in a conference room that sounded good. Listen, if you're making decisions about your value proposition and your pitch in a conference room without talking to a single customer, then you are in for a bruising. Not by me, but by the market. Because anything that your customer doesn't say is nothing more than an educated guess. You need to get out there. You need to get inside their heads. You need to call them up on the phone and you need to ask them, why do you buy from us? Why do you stay with us? What were the objections you had in the selling process? How did we overcome them? What makes us better and different than any other option that you have available to you? What did we do in the selling process that actually got you to buy from us? What caused you to trust us? If another customer was to ask you, or another potential customer was to ask you, tell me the 3 top things that makes these guys a better choice than any other choice I have, what would you say? These are questions you need to ask, and you can't answer them or dream up some answer to them in your conference room. Now, you might get pressure from the higher-ups on this one, or maybe you're one of the higher-ups. Maybe you have time pressure. Believe me, it's better to answer this question right and equip your sales force than to have your sales force, which is expensive to feed, right? Leads and shoe leather and airline tickets and all the expenses that are involved in selling. It's much less expensive to figure out your killer value proposition first and then equip your sales force so they can go out and sell your product. So here's my diagnostic question for you. Does your website, your product marketing materials, your sales tools, even your value proposition answer the principal question a KVP should, which is, again, why should I do business with you instead of anyone else, including the option of spending money on nothing at all? If not, what do you think needs to change or be emphasized? One final comment. For many of us, our competition right now is not X firm or Y firm. It's not the other guy selling against us. Our competition today is the status quo. More than ever, people are deferring their decisions to buy because they're just not convinced that either it's worth the risk or that it delivers the value or that it's going to improve their business in any way that they can't just gut it out. You need to ask yourself these questions, and your value proposition needs to answer the principal question which a value proposition does.